This next story is called Golly Called Out the SKEGNESS Fire Brigade. It's one of 3 stories about Goliath and his pal Bonnie. Incidentally, you can read these stories in Goliath's own picture storybook. It's available from our website as a free download. This is just a small part of that full story. Goliath and his friend Big Bonnie had been with us for a couple of years by now. With Trina and Jeff now living on the premises permanently, it had become much easier to cope with Goliath's problem of toppling over if he moved too quickly in changing direction. Goliath's problems. When it had first begun to happen, due to his increasingly weak and wobbly rear legs plus severe arthritis, it had been very difficult to get him back on his feet. His legs would not fold up under him like a younger horse and just stretched out stiff and rigid. To begin with, we ran round the village asking for help from the first 5 or 6 strong men we could find. He needed rocking up onto his side and packing with straw bales behind his shoulders to give him support. From this angle, it was easier to pull at his head and just lever him up on his feet. The support in the village soon dwindled, and we had to find something else. One day, in fact, he got his head stuck in one of the metal hay feeder rings. I managed to jump in and twist his head round and pop it out, with the result that he toppled over backwards and sat on his bottom, looking somewhat dazed. I knew I had just a few moments to get help and pull him up in just the reverse direction, back onto his feet. No way was he going to do it unaided. At the same moment, I saw some folk at our house gate. Daughter Helen was talking to the group. Among them were 2 strong men. I shouted for help. All looked in my direction and just gawped at me. I shouted again, but this time used some rather strong language. This broke their evident dream world, and at the same time I dashed up to them and explained what I needed. I did eventually manage to get those 2 strong men to aid me in pulling the old chap back onto his feet before he toppled over sideways. And then the whole problem would have become far more complicated. Daughter Helen vented her wrath on me for swearing at strangers and using strong language on people who would never ever come back again. We didn't see those folk again. They must have thought the whole episode most bizarre, but to me and old Golly it was just another incident which needed a positive and rapid solution. We had succeeded. The big one. Not long afterwards, Golly fell down very early one morning. Ruth and I were on our own and could not raise him. All 3 of us were getting totally exhausted, and I really felt desperate. I telephoned the fire brigade and explained the situation. They were simply marvellous, and within just a few minutes we had 3 fire engines and over 17 firemen on the scene. I explained the situation to the chief officer, and he detailed 1 fire engine to remain and the others to return to standby. We tried everything they had. They used the ropes, straw bales and a head collar, but the old chap was far too tired by now to help. They used airbags that would normally lift crashed cars and vans, but the old chap just slithered off these. By now the firemen had been on the scene for a couple of hours, and I knew we were in need of something special. A farmer who often supplied us with hay and straw had a forklift with a long nose, a Sanderson teleporter. It could drive close to the open-sided shed where Goliath was laying, poke its long nose through the gap in the building, and with the aid of the slings carried by the fire engine for lifting cattle from muddy situations, we could succeed. The fireman agreed to give it a chance, and I telephoned the farmer. It was just 4 a.m. The farmer and his unusual forklift arrived about 40 minutes later, having travelled over 6 miles in the pitch-dark winter morning. Having coped with several liftings of fallen animal situations, the fire officer expressed his concern for Goliath, who had by now been lying on his side for almost 4 hours. I had to telephone our vet and ask his advice. Julian told me to just get on with it. The old horse is no good lying on the ground. The fire chief was concerned, you see, for the rapid return of circulation after the horse stood up, and perhaps it would affect his system. The ideal solution. In the end, the solution was just so simple. We slipped the slings around the horse in 2 places to give good support, hooked him up to the forklift nose that was by now hovering over his fallen body, and gently lifted. Up he came, and although very unsteady for a few moments, the old chap was soon amazing the entire crew by his sheer size. After only having seen the horse lying down and struggling for so long, they had just no comprehension of how big he was once on his feet. He was, after all, still the Guinness World's tallest living horse. All enjoying a well-deserved cup of something hot, we watched the horse gradually recover his equilibrium. Apart from opening the old wound on his flank, he seemed fine. Everyone was thanked profusely, and we stood and reflected on the lesson we had learned. We needed a hydraulic lifter for the old horse. Goliath had demonstrated this, just how he intended behaving as he was raised into his normal vertical position with the forklift. He struggled and twisted and turned as soon as his body was clear of the floor. It had to be quick and very strong. Another lesson we learned that evening was that Big Bonnie was very concerned by it all. Just as soon as Goliath was back on his feet, and as we all enjoyed our welcome drink, Bonnie came up to Goliath and gently stood very close by his side, taking some of his weight and helping him keep his balance until more fully recovered from his ordeal. He totally understood his companion's problem and did his best to help. That's the end of that short story. Now, do watch out for some more Golly and Bonnie stories. There are 2 more coming up to be converted into audio slideshows. You'll probably get fed up of us mentioning this now, but here, if you're looking at our YouTube channel, then if you give us a like, if you like it of course, then YouTube will know that we're doing something decent. And if you subscribe, then of course they will let you know as soon as we produce something new. Additionally, if you want to have a look at Goliath's book, you can download it free of charge. Here you can see the link to our bookcase. It's a separate website. There are 10 books on there. You can choose any of them you like, one at a time, and you can find Goliath's colour photograph picture storybook there with the whole history of his life and what it was like for him living with us at Northcote for the last 10 years of his life. There we are, and thank you for listening to our programme this time. Until the next time, bye.